A woman hides her true wealth and marries a man who constantly belittles her for earning less. He demands that she must earn more and humiliates her in public and private. But what he never knew, she secretly owns the luxury penthouse directly above their apartment, and she bought it long before she met him. When he finally crosses a line and threatens to leave her for being financially useless, she reveals the truth in the most shocking way possible, one that flips the power instantly and exposes his real motives. I met Ethan on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where the city feels smaller, quieter, almost like it's holding its breath. He bumped into me near the elevator of the building we both lived in, apologized with a half smile, and offered to help carry my groceries. I didn't need the help, I never did, but something about his insistence felt harmless. He seemed simple, normal, grounded. The kind of man who didn't care about designer bags or last names or what floor you lived on. At least, that's what I thought in the beginning. Back then, I lived in apartment 27B, a modest unit compared to the rest of the building. Small kitchen, smaller balcony, nothing that suggested anything extraordinary about me. And Ethan? He lived in 14A, mid-level, clean, basic. The kind of place that matched the version of me he thought I was. He liked me that way. Soft, quiet, comfortable. A woman who didn't threaten him. We went on a few dates, and he played the role of the caring gentleman perfectly. He spoke about ambition, about wanting to build a future with someone who worked as hard as he did. It sounded sweet at first, almost admirable. I didn't realize then that ambition was just the mask he wore over his insecurity. I never told him what I really did, or what I really owned. He never asked the right questions. He only made the right assumptions. To him, I was a woman with a soft voice and a humble salary, someone who would admire his so-called success, like a trophy in a glass case. He liked being the one who knew more, earned more, controlled more. Every time he paid for dinner, he made it just a little too obvious. Every time he opened a door, he made it feel like a favor. But I liked peace more than confrontation. And a part of me thought, maybe this will change. Maybe kindness will grow. Maybe he'll see who I really am, not my bank account, not my property deeds, but me. We married 6 months later. At first, everything felt manageable. Not perfect, but manageable, like living in a house with slightly uneven floors. You learn where to step. You learn what creaks. You learn how to keep the balance. But the shift was subtle. It started with comments. Small ones. Throwaway ones. The kind that land softly but leave bruises. You know, I wish you were a bit more ambitious. I mean, it wouldn't hurt if you try to earn more. You're lucky. I don't care about money the way other men do. The rent is heavy. Good thing I'm the one handling things. Rent. The word always made me want to laugh, because he never knew the building belonged to a private trust under my name. The management company collected rent, the lawyers handled contracts, and the penthouse on the 48th floor had been fully paid off 3 years before I ever met Ethan. But I let him talk. I let him feel big. I let him believe. Maybe I was waiting to see what he would become without knowing he was being watched. Maybe I wanted to know who he truly was when he thought power was on his side. And truth has a way of coming out. One evening, almost a year into our marriage, he came home late. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie loose, his voice sharp with something like frustration or pride. I couldn't tell which one dominated him more. He threw his keys on the counter and sighed dramatically, the way people do when they want to be asked questions. What happened? I asked gently. He looked at me like the question annoyed him. My colleagues were joking about their wives' incomes, he said. And, do you know what it feels like to be the only man in the room whose wife earns less than half of what he does? I blinked, unsure if he expected sympathy or shame. He continued without waiting. It's embarrassing. It makes me look like I'm carrying all the weight, that I chose poorly. Then he laughed, a bitter sound that echoed through the room. I deserve someone who matches me. Someone who pushes me. A woman who actually earns something. The words hit harder than he thought they would. Not because they were true, but because they exposed him completely. This wasn't about ambition. This wasn't about partnership. This was about ego. Small, fragile, starving ego. Yet still, I didn't reveal anything. Because truth tastes sweeter when the person begging for it is thirsty. Over the next few months, the comments got louder. He criticized everything from my job to my clothes to the way I spent my time. He started giving me tips on how to increase my income. He sent me job listings like he was gifting me diamonds. You just need better discipline, he'd say. Stop being so comfortable with small things. Think big. I wanted to tell him. I was thinking big long before you learned how to spell ambition. But I waited. Quietly. Patiently. Because one day, I knew he would cross the final line. And he did. It was a Sunday morning. Bright, calm, peaceful. The kind of day where sunlight feels warm even on polished floors. Ethan walked into the living room with a cup of coffee and an expression that warned me something ugly was coming. He didn't disappoint. I can't do this anymore, he said, staring at me like I was the one who failed him. I can't live with a woman who earns less than I do. It's not sustainable. Then he added the sentence that finally broke the illusion. I need someone who's financially on my level. I stayed silent. Not out of weakness, but because silence is what people fear the most when they expect tears. He mistook calmness for defeat. He always did. I'm moving out next week, he declared. I'll send you the paperwork. And as he turned away, thinking he had delivered the final blow, thinking he had claimed the power he always wanted, I realized something. He had never known me at all. He had never looked beyond the image he created. He had never seen the elevator key I kept hidden. He had never once imagined that the woman he belittled every day owned the penthouse above his entire world. And soon, very soon, he would. Ethan thought his decision would shatter me. He expected pleading, bargaining, maybe a desperate attempt to prove my worth to him. He didn't realize that I had stopped needing validation long before he started demanding it. His voice was still echoing in the room when he began packing, loud zippers, angry footsteps, the sound of drawers slamming open like I had personally offended the furniture. I watched him quietly as he stuffed his clothes into a suitcase with unnecessary force, as if the cotton shirts had betrayed him too. He didn't look at me once. Not a single glance. It was as if he had already decided I belonged to a chapter he had outgrown. I'll send the separation papers tomorrow, he said, still not meeting my eyes. We can keep it clean and respectful. Respectful. A curious word to choose after months of humiliation. But I simply nodded. Because now it wasn't about reacting. It was about timing, and mine had always been perfect. When he stepped out of the apartment, dragging his suitcase behind him like a symbol of his self-righteous victory, I waited for the echo of his footsteps to fade. Only then did I pick up my phone and call the building management office. Good morning, I said calmly. Activate access for 48PH again. I'll be moving in today. The woman on the other end didn't sound surprised. Of course, ma'am. Everything will be ready within the hour. I changed into a simple outfit, pulled my hair back, and took one long look around the apartment Ethan believed was the peak of our life together. A place he constantly reminded me he was paying for. A place he treated like his personal trophy. It almost made me smile. I grabbed the key card he had never seen and never thought to look for, and walked to the private elevator at the end of the hall. The doors opened instantly, the panel glowing softly as I tapped the card against it. 48PH. Penthouse level. The button lit up like a secret finally ready to breathe. The elevator rose steadily, the city view emerging through the glass as we ascended higher and higher, past Ethan's floor, past everyone else's, past the life he thought he understood. The doors opened into silence. That calm, expensive silence that only the highest places in the world seemed to possess. Sunlight poured in from the floor-to-ceiling windows, spilling across marble tiles. The air smelled like space, wide, unbothered, untouchable. I stepped in without hesitation. Everything was exactly how I left it. The crystal sculptures, the brushed gold fixtures, the private terrace overlooking the skyline, the grand piano no one knew I played. The artwork I commissioned from artists Ethan claimed were out of my league. This home wasn't just luxury. It was identity. It was the version of me untouched by anyone's insecurity. I walked slowly through each room, letting the truth settle inside me again. I had never been the one beneath him. I had only been the one watching him reveal himself. For the next 2 days, I didn't call him. I didn't text. I didn't ask where he was staying or when he planned to collect the rest of his belongings. Silence became my revenge, and he didn't even know he was being punished. Then, on the 3rd evening, I received a message. A short one, almost shaky. "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another message arrived. And another. And another. By the time the 10th message came through, his tone had shifted from confident to confused to something that almost sounded like fear. I waited until the next morning before finally responding with a single line. "Meet me in the lobby at 10. When I arrived downstairs, Ethan was already there, pacing, anxious, hair unkempt like he hadn't slept. The moment he saw me, he froze. "You look different," he murmured. "I moved," I said simply. "I came to get the rest of my things." He blinked. "Moved? Where?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past him toward the elevators. He followed, relentless. "Wait, where are you staying? I need to know." "You will," I replied. "Soon." He stepped beside me as the elevator doors closed, his eyes searching my face for a clue, for a crack, for anything familiar. "You didn't seem upset," he said finally. "Not even when I told you I was leaving. Should I have been?" He swallowed. "I thought you cared more." "I cared enough," I said softly. "Just not in the way you expected." The elevator dinged at the 27th floor, our old floor. Ethan stepped forward automatically, but I didn't move. "Aren't you getting out?" he asked. "No," I said, tapping the keycard against the panel. His confusion deepened as the elevator began moving upward. Past his floor. Past mine. Higher and higher. He watched the numbers climb, his breathing growing uneven. Where are we going?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When the panel displayed the number he had never seen before, his eyes widened. 48 ph. The doors opened, and sunlight spilled into the elevator, flooding the space with the kind of light money could buy but insecurity could never reach. He stepped out slowly, almost frightened, his suitcase-thumping confidence now replaced with quiet disbelief. "Whose place is this?" he whispered. "Mine." I wanted to say it immediately, loudly, triumphantly. But I didn't rush. Instead, I walked into the penthouse with the calmness of someone returning home, not visiting a stranger's apartment. I placed my keys on the marble table. I slipped off my coat and hung it neatly in the hallway closet. And then I turned to face him. "This," I said softly, "is where I live." He stared at me, the truth hitting him in waves, slow, heavy, unstoppable. "You live here," he repeated, as if his mind was refusing to register it. "Since when?" "Before I met you." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked around like the walls might offer him an explanation, like the windows might soften the blow. "You told me you lived in 27B, he said. "I never told you that," I replied. "You assumed, and I let you." His face went pale. "Why would you hide this?" "Because I wanted to know who you were without it." Silence. He stood there, surrounded by everything he had always wanted, and nothing he could claim. He walked toward the terrace, staring out at the city, like the skyline might fix him. "I thought you needed me," he whispered. "I did," I admitted. "But not for money. I needed you to show me your truth." "And what truth is that?" "That you were never looking for a partner," I said. "You were looking for someone to feel superior to." He flinched at the accuracy, the sharpness of it, the way it left no space for excuses. I stepped closer, not out of kindness, but clarity. "You didn't leave me because I earned less," I said. "You left me because you wanted a woman you could control. And when you realized you couldn't shape me the way you shaped your words, you ran." He looked at me with something between regret and desperation. "I made a mistake," he breathed. "A terrible one." I didn't reply. Because the moment begged for silence, the kind that tells a person they're too late. He swallowed hard. "Can we fix this?" I shook my head slowly. You can't fix something you never valued. And for the first time since I met him, Ethan understood the weight of his own choices. He looked around the penthouse with hollow eyes, realizing how small he had made himself in a world he never knew I owned. And as he stood there, drowning in the consequences of his pride, I finally felt free.